Hi, I'm Jeanette Roche. This is Bridge City News. Here are some of the top stories we've been following. Liberal leader Mark Carney stops campaigning to meet with all premiers and have a phone call with the U.S. president. Trump calling the conversation extremely productive. Plus, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says her highly criticized trip to Florida is productive as she makes efforts to educate Americans about the benefits of a tariff-free relationship. And more than 140 people dead after a 7.7 magnitude earthquake hits Southeast Asia.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Jeanette Roche.
Thanks so much for joining us. U.S. President Donald Trump says he spoke with Prime Minister Mark Carney today in a phone call he calls extremely productive. Trump confirmed the call in a post to his Truth Social account, saying he and Carney can find common ground on politics, business, and all other factors. Carney says Canada and the U.S. will soon start comprehensive negotiations for a new economic and security relationship between them, adding those negotiations will start immediately after next month's federal election.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over. What exactly the U.S. does next is unclear, but what is clear is that we as Canadians have agency. We have power.
The Liberal leader, who had broken away from campaigning to speak with Trump and hold a virtual meeting with all the Canadian premiers and territory leaders, resumed his campaign in Montreal today. Meantime, the other party leaders continued to campaign today. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is promising to address rising housing costs if elected by bringing in new rules for corporate landlords and help for nonprofit groups. Speaking in Toronto, Singh says an NDP government would stop financial supports such as low-interest federal loans and mortgage loan insurance for corporate landlords who gouge tenants. Meantime, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre is promising to get tough on crime if his party forms government as the Tories try to raise campaign issues beyond U.S. President Donald Trump's economic threats. Canada's tariff war with the U.S. continues to lead the national conversation. According to Dr. Barry Cooper, political science professor at the University of Calgary, our country's response may be the wrong one.
So far as the Americans are concerned, this is the trade part of it is a means to get Canadians or the government of Canada to deal with drugs. The Americans call it a war on drugs. It's only Canadians who talk about a trade war. And the Americans actually have a point. We've had reports over the past several months of exploding labs out particularly in the Lower Mainland in BC. There's a huge amount of money laundering that everybody knows about that goes through the Lower Mainland, through casinos and so on. So they actually have a pretty good point. And the kind of Canadian nationalist response to this strikes me as being particularly stupid, because if you want to make it a trade war, we, particularly in Ontario and Quebec, are going to be the big losers.
Catch my full interview with political science professor Dr. Barry Cooper coming up right after the business news. Meanwhile, the White House continues to report the tariffs as being the best thing possible for the United States. As we've reported here on Bridge City News, our parent company, Miracle Channel and MCA Media Group, has partnered with Dr. Phil's Merit TV in the U.S. Well, Merit TV's White House correspondent Lindsay Keith asked President Trump's press secretary, Carolyn Levitt, about the impact of the tariffs on the American people. Levitt's response is that Trump has dubbed April 2nd, when tariffs go into effect, as, quote, Liberation Day. Take a look.
Here in our new media seat today, we have Lindsay Keith. She is the managing editor for Merit TV and serves as their White House correspondent. Merit TV launched 1 year ago and creates and distributes content across diverse platforms. We're glad to have you with us, Lindsay. Please kick us off.
Consumer confidence hit a 4-year low this month. Can you help explain to the American people how tariffs will help them in the long run?
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm grateful for the question. The American public will hear later this afternoon from the president directly on the topic of tariffs. And as you all know, April 2nd day, President Trump has proudly dubbed it Liberation Day for our country. What he means by that is it will be a day where the United States of America will no longer be ripped off by nations around this world. It will be a day where Americans finally see free and fair trade practices restored. We are no longer going to allow our allies, our competitors, and our adversaries to take advantage of American workers. And if you think about your hometown and the state that you grew up, Main Street looks a lot different today than it did many years ago. And President Trump wants to restore America as a manufacturing superpower around the globe. He wants products to be made right here in our great country with great, hardworking American hands that will ultimately result in higher wages and more money in the pockets of the American people.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith says she had a, quote, great time yesterday at a fundraiser for a right-wing U.S. organization in Florida. Smith says on social media that she had a meaningful fireside chat with conservative commentator Ben Shapiro about the Canada-U.S. trade war and the benefits of having a tariff-free relationship. She says she also spoke with the chief executive of the event organizer PragerU in an effort to educate Americans about how integral Alberta products are to their day-to-day lives. The Alberta Premier also spoke on the latest Alberta Update episode to touch on the federal consumer carbon pricing ending on April 1st. She mentioned she is watching trends in gas pricing and keeping in touch with gas and retail companies to make sure the expected 17-cent decrease occurs on a schedule.
What I'd like to see on April 1st is that if the carbon tax indeed does come off, everybody should see a 17-cent decline in the amount that they're paying at the pump. Now, I've asked my Service Alberta Minister, Dale Nally, he's responsible for consumer protection. What we want to make sure is that the retail gas companies are passing that savings through. So I put a little bit of a warning out there. I've noticed those prices creep up. Some of that is legitimate. Sometimes what happens is that retailers try to keep prices as low as possible because it's very competitive. But because of wholesale markets, if the wholesale price goes up, it means our prices go up. And indeed, prices have recovered a little bit. So having it go up a little bit is justifiable. But I would expect on April 1st, we should see a dramatic decrease in that price. And I'll be asking Minister Nally to make sure it happens.
Kathleen Ganley, the NDP MLA for Calgary Mountain View, was in Lethbridge and stopped by our studio Thursday to chat with Naveen Day. She weighed in on Alberta Premier Danielle Smith's recent meeting with Mark Carney and the list of 9 demands that Smith made. Ganley also voiced her concerns with the future of the Grassy Mountain coal mining project.
Prime Minister Mark Carney and Alberta Premier Danielle Smith recently had a meeting in Edmonton where she made a list of demands that must be addressed within 6 months of the new Prime Minister being installed to avoid a, quote, national unity crisis. Can you tell me a little bit more about this and what your thoughts are?
Yeah, I think that our Premier here in Alberta should be acting in the interest of Albertans. And so what Albertans are concerned about is their cost of living, their jobs, our economy here, their health care. And instead what we have is a Premier who spends her time threatening people, threatening national unity crisis. Albertans are Canadians too. And I would say my biggest concern with Smith's position is that, you know, she's threatening and playing politics when she should be standing up for Albertans.
Wow. And then the fate of the Grassy Mountain coal mining project, let's talk about that because that's now in the hands of the Alberta Energy Regulator. So how do you feel the outcome will be, and do you feel it will be a positive outcome?
Well, I definitely don't want to presuppose what the AER is going to do, but what I will say is this project is a huge concern. So this is, I mean, it exists at all because the UCP went back and forth with respect to the policy on coal, and now they've gone back again. So they've moved one way, they've moved the other way. During the election, they promised, don't worry, it's not going to happen. We're never going to let it happen. And now they've turned around and they've made reg changes. They literally made reg changes while a matter was before the AER in order to ensure that the project could go forward. So I think this is extremely problematic. It's a government that's not acting in the interest of Albertans and that's basically circumventing its own regulatory process.
Alberta NDP MLA for Calgary Mountain View, Kathleen Ganley, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Well, Alberta Health Minister Adriana LaGrange was in Airdrie Friday to announce $17 million from Budget 2025 in planning funds for new urgent care facilities in the province. The province says if the budget is passed, the investments would redirect up to 200,000 lower acuity emergency department annual visits, freeing up capacity for life-threatening cases.
This includes $15 million to support plans for urgent care centres in West Edmonton, South Edmonton, Westview, which would be Stony Plain, Spruce Grove, East Calgary, Lethbridge, Medicine Hat, Cold Lake, and Fort McMurray. And of course, the $2 million that we're talking about today to advance plans for the integrated primary and urgent care facility proposed by One Health Airdrie. The locations for these new urgent care facilities were selected based on current and projected increases in demand for lower acuity care at emergency departments, as well as metrics related to current and future access to care.
Voting time is approaching. The federal NDP candidate for Lethbridge, Nathan Svoboda, stopped by the BCN office and spoke about what he has to offer the Lethbridge community if elected to represent the city in Ottawa. Heidi Echevarria reports.
This candidacy doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's willing to stand and fight for the future that they envision.
There are 5 candidates running for the Lethbridge Member of Parliament. The parties nominated their candidates for the seat in the federal election, which will be held on April the 28th. Among them is the federal NDP candidate for Lethbridge, Nathan Svoboda, who says what makes him unique among his opponents.
I've always been a boots on the ground kind of person. I've always wanted to work hands-on in the community, advocating for the community, and this is just the natural progression of that advocacy. Ultimately, I want to bring that passion, I want to bring that deep rootedness in our community to Ottawa to advocate for us. You hear so often of how people in the West here feel like we're unheard. So you want someone that's not just going to talk, who's going to fight and fight for you. Our community doesn't need to just settle for conservative cuts. It doesn't need to settle for inauthentic token gestures from the Liberal government. We can break the cycle. And New Democrats, we don't just talk, we fight. And we've been fighting for you, and we will continue to fight for you no matter the position we're in. Across Canada, and especially Lethbridge, is feeling it when it comes to threats from the Trump administration down south. Right? And the cost of everything already going up. We're working more and more and feeling less and less secure. And the NDP recognized that. So along with those retaliatory tariffs, we want to do things like remove the wait time for EI or increase EI or have work share programs where if your hours are reduced, that EI can help pick up those lost wages. And again, that's what contrasts the NDP from the other parties, is we have always been worker and family focused. I'm a paramedic. I work with Recovery Alberta and Addictions and Mental Health, primarily with our unhoused and addictions population. And I've really gained a heart and a passion for that community. I've worked with Streets Alive in the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen. I've ran community youth programs in Lethbridge. And this has just been a very natural progression of that advocacy to be able to support my community and the things that we care about. The future isn't something we wait for. It's something we're going to have to fight for. And again, this candidacy, it doesn't belong to me. It belongs to everyone who's willing to stand and fight for the future that we envision.
For Bridge City News, I'm Heidi Echevarria.
Well, in other news, according to Lethbridge Police, in 2024, the vast majority of calls for their service did not require use of force. In a release presenting data shown to the Lethbridge Police Commission, LPS said that through nearly 32,000 call responses, 99.4% were resolved without any use of force. 248 subjects were involved in the 0.6% of cases that did require force. There were no fatalities or hospitalizations, and only 53 subjects sustained minor injuries, with just over half requiring any treatment. In 80% of the cases where there was force required, subjects were perceived as agitated, intoxicated, or suffering through mental health or a state of crisis. 17% had access to weapons and 3% were perceived to be in normal mental state. 21 officers were injured in 2024 and nearly double from 12 injuries in 2023. Additionally, no firearms were discharged in 2024. Only non-lethal methods were used. Chief of Police Shaheen Medizadeh says the officers' ability to communicate and de-escalate situations is what prevents harm and saves lives. Since 2020, LPS says that over 99% of calls for service have been resolved without force each year since. Well, if you love golf, you're going to want to pay attention to this. Lethbridge will be the host club for the 2025 Alberta Men's Amateur Championship. Paradise Canyon has not only been ranked Southern Alberta's #1 course over 26 years and been one of the top 60 in Canada, but it's also where the competition will be held from June 25th through 27th. Jay McGard, head professional at Paradise Canyon Golf Club, gives details about the event.
We will see players arriving for the Alberta Golf Tour. This golf tour is ran by Leah Bathgate out of Calgary, and this tour travels around Alberta and British Columbia throughout the whole golf season. We're also very excited that we've been chosen for one of the 4 two-day major championships that the Alberta Golf Tour is hosting. It is a stroke play event where the other 3 majors are Stableford and a couple other events that they would do. So we're happy to host the stroke play event here at Paradise.
So you're looking at 120 golfers for the event. They'll be down Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday that week. And competitors of that level, they'll usually come down for a practice round as well. So you could see them the weeks or months before a few times. So we'll follow that event up with the Alberta Golf Tour on June 28th, 29th, the Saturday, Sunday afterwards, and get to see another group of this province's skilled amateurs, possibly some of the same ones.
And in November, I was awarded the International Promoter of the Year, which is the world's best. Paradise Canyon, I feel, is that caliber. And to host and be able to host these tournaments and bring all these people in, and we feel there's going to be like thousands that come.
Begard says this will be the first time since 1993 that they've hosted the Provincial Men's Championship. Should be a good time. Well, looking overseas now, at least 140 people are dead in Southeast Asia after a powerful earthquake rocked Myanmar and Thailand. The head of Myanmar's military government says at least 144 people are dead and 730 others injured in the 7.7 magnitude quake that hit on Friday. Thailand says at least 10 people are dead in Bangkok, 16 injured, and 101 others missing after a high-rise building under construction in the city collapsed during the earthquake. The quake struck at around midday and was centered near Mandalay in Myanmar, with a strong 6.4 magnitude aftershock following soon after. Scary stuff. Well, Israel on Friday launched an attack on Lebanon's capital for the first time since a ceasefire ended, the latest Israel-Hezbollah war in November. The Associated Press explains.
Israel carried out its first airstrike on Beirut since November 27, when a ceasefire went into effect, marking the end of the 14-month Israel-Hezbollah war. The airstrike on Beirut came hours after 2 rockets were fired from southern Lebanon into northern Israel. Israel Defense Minister warned after the rockets were fired that Beirut will be attacked after the attack on Kiryat Shmona. Lebanon's militant Hezbollah group said it was not behind the attack. The attack came less than a week since also 3 rockets were fired into northern Israel.
Well, back here in Canada, is March going out like a lion? It seems across much of the country it is. Snowfall warnings are in place from Alberta straight through to Ontario, with some areas expected to see 30 centimeters of snowfall. Southern Ontario is under a freezing rain warning with widespread power outages as a possibility. I'll be right back with the 7-day and national forecast. Well, as I mentioned before the break, snowfall warnings are all afoot across the country as much of the nation is under a blanket of spring snowfall. Now here in southern Alberta, we saw 2 centimeters of snow. We also saw some freezing drizzle, some fog patches. Oh my. And then as we get into this evening, another 2 centimeters expected. 60% chance of flurries though on a Saturday, still remaining mostly above the minuses for the daytime highs there. So 2 degrees for the high on Saturday, 1 on Sunday, mainly cloudy skies. Those clouds sticking around for us on Monday with a high of 3 degrees, then finally climbing back to those double digits on Tuesday with a high of 10 degrees. Wednesday, high of 7. Now Wednesday evening, we could see a 60% chance of showers and or flurries once again. And then as we get into Thursday, high of 4 degrees with a mix of sun and cloud to round out that 7-day forecast. So the average high for this time of year, 9 degrees, and the average low, -4. So for the most part, we are sticking in those averages right there. 20 was the record high on this day, happening back in 1966. And in 1954, we saw the record low, which was -26. Sun rose this morning at 7:17, seeing our sun set this Friday night at 7:57 p.m., giving us 12 hours, 40 minutes of daylight, 4 minutes longer than we saw yesterday. On the west coast, some wet conditions, so 60% chance of showers in Victoria, high of 12 degrees, high of 10 there in Vancouver, and looking at 10 to 20 millimeters of rainfall tomorrow on Saturday. Edmonton saw 10 centimeters of snowfall today as they were under a snowfall warning, and as we get into Saturday there, looking at 30% a chance of flurries, -3 for the high. Now in Calgary, Calgary could see 2 to 4 centimeters of snow tomorrow. Saskatchewan was also under that weather alert, and also some prolonged freezing rain as well. But as we look to tomorrow, mostly cloudy conditions for Saskatoon and Regina, -6 for both of those cities, -3 the expected high tomorrow in Winnipeg. Now, as we get into the central part of the country, we are seeing a lot more freezing rain. We're seeing some snowfall as well. So Toronto, 3 degrees for high tomorrow, could see some showers. Ottawa seeing some flurries tomorrow, -3. But as we get throughout the weekend there, prolonged periods of freezing drizzle is expected in that area. They could expect some power outages, even some downed tree branches, as they could see 5 to 10 millimeters of accumulation of ice buildup. At Montreal, same thing. Looking at flurries on Saturday, could see freezing rain into Sunday, though, high of 0 there. As we look to the Maritimes here, Atlantic Canada, Fredericton seeing a mix of sun and cloud, 30 degrees for the high. Same thing for Halifax. Charlottetown, -3 for the high, and mix of sun and cloud, and then could see a 40% chance of flurries there in St. John's with a high of 0. So there you have it. That is your forecast. Canada's economy started off hot but cooled in February. Stats Canada said the GDP rose 0.4% in January, largely to a boom in the oil, gas, and mining industries. It marks an increase from 0.3% growth in December. Canada's goods-producing industries were hot in January, rising 1.1% for their biggest one-month jump in over 3 years. The federal government has posted a $26.8 billion deficit for the period stretching from last April to January. That's compared to a deficit of $25.7 billion for the same period a year earlier. The Finance Department's monthly fiscal monitor shows that revenue for the 10-month period was $398.6 billion, up from $359.3 billion a year earlier. Now here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was down 401 points on the day to finish at 24,759. The Dow was down 715 points to 41,583. The S&P 500 was down 112 points to 5,580, and the Nasdaq was down 481 to 17,322. West Texas Intermediate oil was down 88 cents to $69.04 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 16 cents to $4.09 US. Gold was up 30.34 to $30.86 US an ounce. Silver was down 33 cents to $34.09 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel. Barley is at $6.64. Canola is at $13.86, and corn is at $7.95 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was down 72 cents to $208.82. Feeder cattle were down 89 cents to $286.76, and lean hogs were down 32 cents to $86.70. And the Canadian dollar was down over the past 24 hours and currently sits at $69.90 US.
Recapping one of our top stories today, U.S. President Donald Trump says he spoke with Prime Minister Mark Carney in a phone call he calls extremely productive. Trump confirmed the call in a post to his Truth Social account, saying he and Carney can find common ground on politics, business, and all other factors. Carney says Canada and the U.S. will soon start comprehensive negotiations for a new economic and security relationship between them, adding those negotiations will start immediately after next month's federal election. Canada's tariff war with the U.S. continues to lead the national conversation, but according to Dr. Barry Cooper, political science professor at the University of Calgary, our country's response may be the wrong one. Hear more from Dr. Cooper about this and other political issues coming up right after the break. Also, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. You can also visit our website or our YouTube page anytime for more of our stories and interviews. The tariff wars continue to rattle Canada amidst our federal election. Which candidate will Canada trust the most in this ongoing battle? That's the big question. So joining us to talk about this and more is Dr. Barry Cooper. He is a professor of political science at the University of Calgary. Dr. Cooper, welcome. Great to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
All right. So everyone is talking about the 25% tariff, which Trump has placed on cars and light trucks. So what's your take on this? How should Canada respond?
Well, I put it this way. I don't think we should respond by taking the approach of our friends in Ontario. I think that Danielle Smith probably has a much more prudent and probably will prove to be more effective response, which is to keep talking and to actually to negotiate. I mean, we're in a better position than they are in Ontario because of the amount of oil that we send down to the States. So that, you know, that probably strengthens her hand. What most of the media discussion has managed to ignore is that, so far as the Americans are concerned, this is the trade part of it is a means to get Canadians or the government of Canada to deal with drugs. The Americans call it a war on drugs. It's only Canadians who talk about a trade war, and the Americans actually have a point. We've had reports over the past several months of exploding labs out in, particularly in the Lower Mainland in BC. There's a huge amount of money laundering that everybody knows about that goes through the Lower Mainland through casinos and so on. So they actually have a pretty good point, and the kind of Canadian nationalist response to this strikes me as being particularly stupid, because if you want to make it a trade war, we, particularly in Ontario and Quebec, are going to be the big losers. So generally speaking, I'd say the response of Canadian politicians has been pretty dumb.
Okay, almost like they're not getting the right kind of advice from the right people, maybe.
Yeah, well, they have different agendas, particularly with elections going on. I mean, it was quite clear that the re-election of the Ford government in Ontario, Doug Ford simply took advantage of his way of framing differences of opinion with the Americans to emerge as a kind of Captain Canada. That's a mythical position that goes back to before Canada existed. It goes back to the Loyalists, the refugees from the American Revolution.
Wow.
They were saying that at the turn of the 18th to 19th century, and it it resonates with people in Ontario. It doesn't make much sense to Albertans, but it it seems to make sense to them.
Now, Dr. Cooper, you did mention Alberta there, and you started this out by mentioning the Premier, Danielle Smith. So she is actually being accused right now of treason, among other things, for traveling to Florida to do a talk show with Ben Shapiro, who's, of course, a very right-leaning influencer. What are your thoughts on this?
I think partly she's doing this to show her independence of the Laurentian Canadians Team Canada approach. She's doing this for her own political reasons. I think that most Albertans would reject being subordinate to Ottawa and Queen's Park in Toronto. So I think most Albertans will support this, if for no other reason that it annoys our fellow citizens in the East.
That's funny. Now, Premier Smith has also laid out a list of 9 demands to federal leaders, including no emissions cap on oil and gas, and which is repealing Bill C-69, the No More Pipelines bill, or else. So she's floating the idea of a referendum. So do you think Alberta could actually come to a place where separation is a real, viable option?
I do, particularly if the government of Canada makes no move on any of the things that have been long-standing complaints from a succession of Alberta governments with respect to what the government of Canada has been doing to stifle our economy. And if they keep it up and they refuse to negotiate and they show no interest in negotiating, then that window gets closed. And so there's not much else that Albertans can do. I think a referendum right now, probably it wouldn't be a particularly smart idea. But if the government of Canada keeps on being as intransigent as they have been for the past several generations, then a referendum, much as in Quebec, would probably sober things up a bit. If you remember, the referendum in Quebec was a response in part to sort of unfinished aspects of the 1982 Constitution, which in turn was a response to the incredible secularization of Quebec after World War II. Now, again, the Canadian society has changed with the enormous amount of economic power in Alberta and Saskatchewan, but there's been no constitutional response to it. Even though successive Albertan and increasingly Saskatchewan governments are telling the government of Canada that we're not happy with the way things are set up now. If they don't want to talk, then there is the Clarity Act. There is help that I'm sure that we would get from our friends south of the border. So, yeah, there's some real options there, and we'll have to see what the government of Canada does in response to Danielle Smith's long-standing statement about what Alberta's interests are.
Mm-hmm. And how big of an issue do you think pipelines or building pipelines will be in this election? And do you think any of the candidates will actually be able to make this happen?
I think that Mr. Carney will say almost anything. Whether he will repudiate what he truly believes in, and he said many, many times about hydrocarbons, I wouldn't trust the guy for a moment. I don't think that the Premier does. Pierre Poilievre, he doesn't seem to have the same kind of hysterical view about climate change as Mark Carney does. So if you were going to be strategic, I suppose you'd want to vote for Poilievre because he is likely to be, he's more likely to approve pipelines, particularly to the Pacific. But again, the Liberals have been on record for years as opposing that. So, why any Albertan in their right mind would vote for a Liberal, kind of beats me. But we'll see. Albertans are, they have their own reasons, I'm sure, to vote whichever way they do.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Which candidates, in your opinion, are dealing with Trump most effectively, or would deal with him most effectively?
Well, I think Danielle Smith would.
Out of the federal candidates.
when she went down to Mar-a-Lago with Kevin O'Leary, they seemed to get along fairly well. When President Trump said he thought he'd get along better with liberals than he would with conservatives, nobody.
That was interesting, wasn't it?
Very interesting. But if you look at it from his point of view, what he was saying is that the liberals have so messed up the Canadian economy over the past 10 years that we're in a much weaker position because of that. So, of course, he'd much rather deal with liberals because they've managed to ruin the Canadian economy. That makes perfect sense. Poilievre then has replied, yes, well, I've got principles, the implication being obviously that the liberals don't. And again, that would make sense from Trump's point of view, because if you have principles, that means that you're not as transactional as President Trump likes to be in his diplomacy. There's some things, I guess, that for Poilievre are non-negotiable. It's hard to see that there's anything non-negotiable from the liberals. I mean, they've done already a 180-degree turnaround on just about everything that they said was so important a couple of months ago. Those are the kind of people that Trump likes to work with.
Interesting. Okay, something also interesting in this election is that the Conservatives have much more support than they normally have from unions. So what's that all about? What's going on there?
Well, I think that's also part of the principled part of the Conservatives. Mark Carney is been famous for the last 25 years of his life of being a globalist. And when the unions are local, they're not part of some global economy. They're part of an Ontario economy or a BC economy or Quebec or Alberta. They will have local interests, and they would want somebody who would defend them and have their back on some of these negotiations. That would certainly not be Mark Carney. It would not be a globalist. It would be somebody who is serious about and principled, as Poilievre kept saying, about what he's going to defend.
Okay. Affordability and climate change are big factors in this election, and Poilievre has long promised to axe the tax, but now Mark Carney has also dumped the consumer carbon tax. So do you think voters will trust Carney to put the economy ahead of climate change?
I have no idea. I have some views. I teach, part of one of the courses I teach is dealing with the environmentalism as an ideology, of which climate change is a major component. Whether Canadians accept that Mark Carney can change his mind on something that he is, I won't say he's been fanatical, but he's certainly been very strong in his opinions about basically CO2 production. That if Canadians think he's changed his mind, I think they're dumber than most people would. I don't think he's changed his mind at all. I don't think that he will act. Well, he will. I would say he would continue to do what the Liberal Party has done for the past 10 years with on the environmental agenda, which is basically try and shut down and effectively destroy the economy of this province. And I have no reason to think that Mark Carney would do anything any different, no matter what he says. I think the guy will say anything to get elected. And then the hammer will come down.
All right. Another interesting and controversial promise from Pierre Poilievre is to massively cut foreign aid, which he says is often going to untrustworthy places, and instead use that money to protect Canada's Arctic. And then Carney does agree that Canada's Arctic needs to be protected, but he also argues that Canada should not stop showing compassion to needy countries. So do you think that will help the Conservatives, or does it come across as being too much like Elon Musk and Trump?
I think there are a lot of normal Canadians who, whether they vote for the Conservatives or not, who probably are of the view that what Musk is doing and what Trump has told him to do with respect to foreign aid is probably a good idea. Canada, I don't think, has had any serious study of where our tax money goes offshore. We have a few little things every once in a while comes out about, say, UNRWA in the Middle East, but very little is really known about where Canada's offshore expenditures are. That would be a really interesting thing to study. I mean, it's not an area of my specialization at all, but it would be a very interesting thing for the next government to study, and then see where we can cut a lot of money that often just gets wasted.
Yeah, it is interesting what the Americans are doing right now, for sure. I mean, with that Department of Governmental Efficiency, and that essentially is what Musk is doing. And I guess it looks like he's finding all kinds of stuff that money has been wasted. And then there's the other side, accusing him of axing entire departments and cutting people's jobs. So it's kind of a mess. Both countries are kind of a mess right now, it looks like. But getting back to this election, Dr. Cooper, what do you think Carney and Poilievre need to do to win seats in Quebec?
Well, it would be nice if Mark Carney could speak French. That would probably help him there. Apparently, he's embarrassed by his
French-speaking abilities, maybe.
Yeah, his limitations.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, quite frankly, what happens in Quebec is a kind of a black box. I noticed today in the paper that Poilievre said that he would not cut supply management. Okay, that'd be nice if some politician someday would say that supply management harms everybody except Quebec milk farmers and cheese producers. But of course, they don't want to do that, for obvious short-term electoral reasons. Quite frankly, I've got no idea I don't follow Quebec politics that much. And I really have no idea who's going to come out with on the long end of the stick there. I kind of hope it's the Bloc. I mean, they always provide entertaining remarks in the House of Commons.
There you go for our entertainment. Well, I didn't get to all my questions today, but unfortunately we're out of time here, Dr. Cooper, but I thank you so much for being with us today.
You're welcome. Good talking to you.
You as well. Barry Cooper is a professor of political science at the University of Calgary.
Every year, Canadians lose millions of dollars to scammers. Why and how does this happen, and what can we do to avoid getting caught in a scam? Joining me now to talk about this is Odetta Durofte. She's the Manager of Community Outreach and Education with the Alberta and East Kootenay branch of the Better Business Bureau. Good to have you with us, Odetta.
Thank you for having me this morning.
So first of all, can you explain to our viewers what the BBB is all about, and how would you typically be of assistance to a Lethbridge business person, for example?
Yeah, so the Better Business Bureau is a nonprofit organization who strives to create trust between consumers and businesses. We've been serving Alberta, including the Lethbridge area, for over 70 years. We have a website, bbb.org, where we provide with business listings for free for consumers to check them out. So we invite you to visit our website and find a reputable and trustworthy business there.
And every year, the Better Business Bureau of Canada comes out with a scam tracker risk report and a top 10 list of fraudulent scams that are ripping off Canadians. Can you explain the criteria used to rank the risk index?
Yeah, so the Better Business Bureau, as you mentioned, we have this amazing risk report. It's called the Scam Tracker Risk Index Report, which we've been publishing every year since 2016. And we receive a number of reports each year. Last year, in 2024, we received more than 81,000 reports. And so we use that data to analyze, to look at what are the most common scams that are being perpetrated, who is more at risk. And we also look at the financial and non-financial losses as well. So this is a tri-dimensional process. Then we look at the exposure, we look at the susceptibility, and we look at the losses. And then we learn from this, and then we can further educate consumers and businesses on some of the red flags and how to prevent from falling a victim to them.
Cryptocurrency and investment scams were at the top of the list. So what makes these so attractive, and what do we need to be on the lookout for?
So the adage, don't invest something that you can't afford to lose, it applies here. But what we are really talking about here is investment in general, and using cryptocurrency as a form of investment in particular inherently is high risk. So we are talking about, though, criminal professional crime organizations who will make a connection with you via one of the social media platforms, be it a dating website or an investment forum, and they will offer you an opportunity. So they're going to be in connection with you. They're going to work on gaining your trust. And once the trust is established, they're going to come up with the amazing investment opportunity that they want you to be a part of. And it usually starts low. So you are asked to invest very small amount of money. They may even show you a website where you can track that money. And then so you are giving them that trust and you continuing to invest more and more. And at a point when you are no longer comfortable with this investment and you want to put a stop to it, but then you are seeing yourself in a situation when they're not letting you. They come up with excuses for why you cannot take your return out of this investment. They may say things such as you need to pay other fees and taxes on top of that. And for whatever scenario they have, the idea is, the bottom line is, you are trapped in that. But we encourage everyone that at any point in time, when you are seeing the red flags of an investment scam, don't be afraid to move back. So to stop, disengage, stop connections, stop communications, and go reach out to your financial institution, to your bank, go to your local police, and talk with someone with your family or your friends, with your network. Talk about it, as you are not alone. This happens more often than we realize.
Now, employment scams were number 2 on the list. Can you explain how that one works?
Well, employment scam is definitely second most riskiest scam in Canada for the second year in a row. And so the way this works, there's a few different variables, but the most common scenario is we are seeing in our reports is that the scammer, the fraudster, will set up a fake website where they are either posing job openings, or they will just connect with you via social media messaging, or they'll send you a text message and they'll say they have this great offer for you. Or they may say they found your resume on one of the job boards. And then so from there, really, things start to move really quickly. They may jump ahead and send you an offer that just looks too good to be true, with all the attractive deals, high salary, work from home, flexible hours. So they're very attractive. And they may send you, they'll say, there's a link for you to apply. This is the only way we accept applications, through this link. So what they're really looking for is your information. They want your legal name. They want your date of birth. They want your SIN number. So if we think about it, employment scams can be or can have ties to identity theft type scams. So it's very important to stop and think, research the company, make sure you are dealing with a legitimate company, make sure the posting exists, check out their social media pages, look up reviews on the company, on the position as well, to compare everything. We just need to always be cautious.
And what about romance or relationship scams? What are some warning signs that we should be aware of?
Well, the romance or the relationship type of scam really has close ties to the investment or the cryptocurrency type of scams. And it does happen very similar to the investment scam. So the same scenario, perhaps you're dating on a website, on a public website, and then there's somebody who shows up, they're presenting themselves as the best fit, or they have all the qualities, they match with what you are looking for within your profile. And then they really they move on quickly. So, but again, they want to gain your trust. They may say that they love you a little too soon, and then they are working on that process of gaining fully your attention and your trust. It may take a few days or weeks or months until they come up with an investment opportunity. So you need to look out at red flags, such as the relationship moves on too fast, they want to move in with you really, really soon. And then they bring in money into discussion. They're going to present you pictures of their luxurious life, their luxurious vehicles and homes and vacation plans. So the all looks too good to be true scenario applies here.
And we have a fairly significant senior population in the Lethbridge area. Are seniors at a higher risk of scams, and what age groups are more susceptible?
Well, all age groups, unfortunately, can be a target of a scam. To say that only seniors, that's simply not true. As we've discussed employment scams just earlier, that really targets those aged 18 to 44. So what we are commonly seeing for seniors is the grandparent scam and bank imposter scam.
And then on the flip side of risks for seniors is the risk to our youth. Apparently, scammers are targeting younger people as well. What does the younger generation need to be looking out for?
So younger generation, often we hear that they think they can be smarter than the scammers, they can outsmart the scammers. So we say information is power. That's a dangerous notion to play around, to say that we can outsmart the scammers. So information is power, education is crucial. We at the Better Business Bureau, we offer free presentations, free workshops for everyone in our serving area, including the youth. And Fraud Prevention Month, March is Fraud Prevention Month. The Better Business Bureau, we partnered up with other fraud prevention partners to educate and to spread the awareness and the fraud prevention tips to help everyone to prevent them from falling a victim to a scam.
And now we have a federal election just around the corner. Are election scams a thing, like where parties or people pretending to be from a certain political party are asking for donations?
That can happen, absolutely. We are seeing some of the charity scams as well, some of the donations. Anyone can pretend to be anyone. So we need to be on the lookout. And the best thing to do really in any scenario is do your research all the time. Use the internet, come on bbb.org, see what information we have on the individual, on a company to make an informed decision.
Online purchases continue to be a risk. How are people getting caught online, and what are the no-nos to watch out for?
So if you are planning to purchase online, just make sure that, again, then you are looking up that company. Is the company legitimate? Is the website secure? Look for the HTTPS in the URL. And then view the products that company is selling. Do a Google reverse image search. Make sure that the website that product doesn't come up in any other websites. If they do, then potentially it could be a stock picture so that the products don't even exist. And if you can plan on using credit cards, if there's any issues with it down the road, then you can dispute with your financial institution. And again, do your research on the company, on the products, read reviews, ask for references.
And advance fee loans is another common scam. How does this typically get presented?
Well, that would be, it's targeting those who are already in a financial need. So if you are looking for a loan from a traditional bank and for whatever reason that is not accessible to you, then you have the option to look for alternative options, and you're looking at loan companies. And so when the loan company comes to you and says, we are offering you this loan, quick offer, we guaranteed, we are don't even look in or don't even doing a credit check, we are just giving you this money. However, we need money to be paid up front for the loan to be released. So that is the advance fee loan. So they are asking money from you before they give you the money. That's illegal, and that's the risk, and that's the scam. So loan companies, legitimate and trustworthy loan companies, will never ask you to pay money up front.
Now, tax scams have been going around for a while. What is it about them that try to convince people that these people are actually with Canada Revenue Agency?
Yes, so the tax type of scam, the CRA type of scam, we call them the authority scam. What they do, especially during the tax season, is they're going to call us or text messages, and they'll say they're representing the government. And then they immediately say that there's, they're using the threat or the reward, the stick or the carrot. So they're going to say there's some issues, you haven't filed your taxes, you owe money to the government. If you're not paying it immediately, you're in big trouble. They're going to put you in jail. So really, we always have to verify any of this kind of information directly with the government. Never trust our caller ID, never trust somebody who's threatening us over the phone. And governments will never engage with us in a phone conversation to threaten us to pay the money that we owe them. And if not, then they're going to put us in jail.
So because the scam has been going on for a while, is it still a very common one, or have people already caught on that this is not legitimate? I think the big red flag is when you have to pay your taxes with Walmart or Amazon gift cards.
Exactly. Unfortunately, this is still continuing to occur, and we help those who are new to Canada, new Canadians, to understand that that's not how things work. That's not how a government operates. And that, as you said, governments will never ask us to pay if we owe anything to them, will never ask us to pay via gift cards, via Amazon or iTunes cards. It always has to go through the bank, through a means of transaction that can be traceable.
Any final reminders for our viewers on how to sniff out a scam? And tell us about how the BBB website can be of help as well.
Yeah, so definitely I will just end up saying that a healthy skepticism is always good. It comes handy. So don't believe everything that you see or read. The too good to be true. If something is too good to be true, it probably is. This is an old tip in the books, but it still applies. And then always be careful and cautious whenever you are sensing the urgency. When there is a sense of urgency, someone is pressuring you to do something, to act quickly, that's always a red flag. And yes, please visit our website, bbb.org. We have many free services for consumers. You can visit our scam tracker that can be found on bbb.org/scam tracker. And you can view our most recent scam tracker risk report also on our website.
Odetta Durofte is the Manager of Community Outreach and Education with the Alberta and East Kootenay branch of the Better Business Bureau. Odetta, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Naveen Day. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks for watching.